speaking now, we are heading to go online on YouTube. And for those of you who are joining us on Zoom and YouTube as well, so we've changed our timing from the previous time, 7 o'clock, to what's now 6 o'clock UK time. So if you're joining us, not to worry. It's basically, we've just changed the timing. If you are unable to watch this live, you can watch a recording of this, inshallah, very, very soon. So that's all set as well. Okay, in the meantime, as we are waiting for our students and everyone else to log in, please do let me know if you have any questions, and then we will, inshallah, put them up to Ustadha Nadda, and I'll be here in the background as well. So if you have any questions, please put them down in the chat. Okay, so Zahra said that she's getting her notes ready, which is fantastic. Well done, Zahra. I've seen some of your notes on our website, which you uploaded. Jazakallah for that. That's fantastic. In the meantime, if anyone has questions, whether you're on Zoom or whether you are on YouTube, please do send them over. So as we normally do, we wait for the first 5 minutes just to get started, just to allow everyone to settle in, get your pen and paper ready if you're going to be writing down notes. And inshallah, we will be starting very soon. I'm quite excited about today's lesson because it's going to be about the Ashabul Kahf, the youngsters who went into a cave. And I'm not going to tell you too much more. I'm going to leave that to Ustadha Nadda. But I'm excited because it's a very, very interesting story. Very interesting story. And there's also a miracle involved with which took place with these youngsters, but also not forgetting another creature that went with them, their dog. So it's these youngsters and a dog that went into this cave. And I will leave the rest to Ustadha Nadda when we do start. Just to let you know as well, when I went to Jordan not last year, but a few years ago, I alhamdulillah visited that very cave where the people of the cave slept. And I mean, Allah knows best if it's the actual cave, but it's believed to be that cave in Jordan. In Turkey, there's also another cave which is ascribed to it. But as far as we know, Allah knows best, but it's one of them. I think the one in Jordan is more accurate based on some of the scholars and stuff that I've read. So anyway, that was just a few notes whilst we're waiting for everyone else to join us. Alhamdulillah, yes, I am well, Zahra. We have 1 more minute, Ustadha Nadda, and after that, you're more than welcome to begin your session.
Ustad, would you like to show some of the work?
Are you, sorry?
Are you able to hear me?
We could do that towards the end. So whilst your session is, I can, yes, I can. Your internet is slightly slow, so what you might want to do, Ustadha Nadda, it will be more clearer. But I think, no, it's fine. I think it's fine. It's okay.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. Usually it's fine, but I think today it's a bit,
yeah. Or it could even be my internet. But nevertheless, I think it's time to begin, Ustadha. So if you want to go ahead and Bismillah.
All right. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Apologies firstly because last week we were unable to do the tafsir session, but alhamdulillah we're able to do it today. So this is our 5th session, alhamdulillah, and we are going to be looking at the different themes, the theme of isolation within the different stories in the Qur'an, trying to take lessons from that. Just a quick recap of what we did the week before last week. So we talked about Surah Yusuf, Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam. We looked at the verses 36 and 37. And it was a narrative of Yusuf alayhi salam, how his experience and how he got into the prison. And Ustad Hamid told us the whole narrative as well. So Ustad Hamid managed to explain to us as well the whole story, and then we looked at those two verses, how Yusuf alayhi salam was in the prison, what happened to him, how he got out of it, and the way he had this skill of interpreting the dreams of the two people he had with him in prison. And the lessons we've learned from those two verses were mainly to have hope, a faith in Allah, regardless of how difficult your position is, even if you don't think there will be a way out, but to still have that hope was the key lesson we learned from those two verses. Because Yusuf alayhi salam went through so many difficulties throughout his life, from childhood all the way to he was grown. So all that time that he faced so many difficulties, eventually in the end he was um, granted success and he was reunited with his father. Carried on with courage, so again links in with the hope theme of not giving up, having that courage to be able to face those situations, to those circumstances as well. And lastly, we focused on the um, this understanding that we got from those two verses, was that we should be be grateful of the talents and skills we have. And I know sometimes we think how these talents that we have will be a benefit, especially when you feel like these talents are not in use. For example, when Yusuf alayhi salam was in prison, if anyone else was in that same situation, they would never give any thought to why, how my helping towards someone else could bring that benefit, and how my skills which Allah has bestowed me, for example, to interrupt the dreams, can benefit, uh, just doing that good to someone. And that's similarly to what happened to Musa alayhi salam as well, when he was helping the two girls feed their animal water. He had nothing with him in that situation. He was in the worst situation. Usually people are so depressed and in that kind of a they feel so sorry for them that they don't think about other people and how we can provide good for other people. But Musa alayhi salam still helped those two girls, and and then we know the story of how he was still called to, the father called him and he was given a job. So through these small things that we do have, sometimes we forget them because our focus is always on the fact that why are we in this situation? Why is this happening to me? And then we forget, well, we have they are still talents within us that we can still use. And again, to have hope and courage, to not give up in Allah. So that's what we looked at in Surah Yusuf. Today, inshallah, we're going to be looking at the people of the cave, the young men who ran away from the city and took refuge in the cave. The actual location, as mentioned by Ustad Hamid, been mentioned by many scholars that it was in Jordan. There is a difference of opinions where some people say it wasn't. It was nearby. There was another location. So we're not 100% sure where it was. But we're going to go for Jordan, inshallah. There's a map that I found in the book by Shawki Abdul Khalil. This was shared by Ustad Hamid, and he also mentions a different opinion of where the verse could be. Anything else, Ustad, you would like to add?
Sorry, I just had to go out to collect some post, but I'm back now.
All right. I was
So
just
to
telling them
continue.
how there's a difference of opinion of where the cave would be.
Oh,
So
yeah, yeah.
some people have mentioned in Jordan, whereas looking at this book, it mentioned a different location.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think a lot of these sites, and I think I just want to add on this as well, there's many sites, historically speaking, that a lot of countries will claim, that these belong to certain people from the Quran, or these belong to certain companions. But I think only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows the truth. Just to give you a quick example, I remember before the war started in Syria, I was sitting in the Jami' Masjid, the Umayyin mosque in Damascus, in Dimashq. And this mosque, right, the Grand Mosque used to be, way before, it used to be part of the whole, pagan building. It was a pagan religious building. And then afterwards, when Christianity came, it became a church. Okay. And then following that, it became, half of it became a church and half of it became a masjid. And now it's became a complete mosque. And when you go inside the mosque, there's so many different aspects and sites that you can see. So they even have like a musalla there, which they believe, where they believe Khidr alayhi salam would have come. They also have the head of Prophet Yahya alayhi salam buried there. There's kind of made like a shrine there. And I remember speaking to one of the scholars over there, and I said to him that, look, the head of Yahya alayhi salam is here. And I told him that when I went to Turkey, to the Topkapi Museum, and in Topkapi, they have the arm of Yahya alayhi salam. Right. So then I spoke to him, and he was saying that actually, if you look at the tradition, it just mentions that Prophet Yahya alayhi salam, his head was cut off by King Herod at the time. And there's no mention of the arm. So sometimes there are a lot of times where things are ascribed to prophets, things are ascribed to companions, but only Allah knows best about the reliability of them and how true it is. We can obviously see those things, but then at the back of our minds, be well aware that this may be true, may not be true, and only Allah knows the reality of them. So that's, I think, an important thing to remember. And even in Damascus, for instance, in Dimashq, there are about 3 graves, for instance, attributed to Bilal radiallahu anhu. So only, I mean, I think it's only like the grave of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, Umar radiallahu anhu. These are like confirmed, and they've passed on with tawatur, you can say. But with the rest, with a lot of the rest, we're unsure. We cannot be 100% sure. Zahra's asking, do we know where Prophet Yahya alayhi salam was found? Yeah, so basically, when they were digging, so when they were doing some reconstruction in the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus, they came across a grave at that point, and that's where the head of Yahya alayhi salam was buried. The rest of his body is in Palestine, from what I can recall, is in Palestine. Okay, Sada, sorry for that. Back over to you, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair, Ustad, for that. So that just gives us some understanding of why these differences appear. So with regards to Surah Kahf, I'm sure we're all aware of the virtues and benefits it has. We've heard so many sayings regarding it. A few of them I thought would be good to just go over. So there's different scholars have said different things about this surah, but the main idea we should get after looking at these differences is that the whole surah in itself is important. So it doesn't matter if it's the first portion or the later portion of the surah. The main idea is that the whole surah in itself is very powerful and it has many benefits. So one of the scholars have said that one should memorize the first 10 verses and the last 10 verses. It's also been mentioned that whoever recites the Qur'an, the Surah Al-Kahf, mentioned by the Prophet ﷺ, on Friday, it will illuminate him with light from one Friday to another. Also, in different narrations, it's been mentioned that when you recite Surah Al-Kahf, it also protects you for that whole week up till the next Friday. Ibn Kathir also goes in many details regarding the virtues and benefits, and he narrates a hadith by Abu Darda radiallahu anhu that if anyone learns by heart the first 10 verses of Surah Al-Kahf, he will be protected from Dajjal. Some people also say that if you memorize the whole surah, that gives you protection. Some people say you should Even if you recite the first 10 verses and last 10 verses, that gives you protection. Um, Tirmidhi also says to memorize the first 3 verses of the surah. So you can see this difference in whoever thinks which one is more important. But I think the kind of a lesson I take away is that if we can't memorize the whole surah, at least you should recite all of it. And obviously there will be benefit in that as well. So reciting the surah, we know has many benefits anyway, but reciting this specifically on the day of Friday has that virtues, gives you that benefits. If you can memorize it, that would be even more great. Do we have
And
questions?
Ustada, yes. So in regards to question, there is a question from either Fiza or Ibrahim, which is an interesting question. It is, what is the Dajjal?
Oh, okay. Would you like to explain us that?
I don't know, it's up to you. I think if you start off and then I'll just fill in the gaps, if there
So
are any.
yeah, so the Dajjal was so it's been reported that the Sahabas asked who this person is. As far as I know, there was a time when the Sahaba were traveling with the Prophet ﷺ and they came across an island where they saw this man. Now, I'm not sure if that's correct, Ustad.
Sure. Yeah. So sorry, I was just responding to another parent. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in regards to Dajjal, so there's this figure. Okay. There's this individual. There is this person who has been mentioned in various ahadith. Okay. He's not mentioned by name in the Quran as far as I can recall, but he's mentioned in hadith that he will come towards the end of times and he will cause chaos and havoc throughout the world. Some of you are mentioning he's the one-eyed liar. So let's look at that point. So yes, he will be. So Dajjal, the actual literal meaning of Dajjal is the great or the biggest liar. Okay, and Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam mentioned that he will be the Dajjal. He will come as, and he will be one of the major signs of Qiyamah, one of the big signs of Qiyamah. We're not gonna. I'm not going to talk too much about this. We might actually do a lesson on this next week.
Yeah.
But just about Dajjal, so Prophet ﷺ has basically said that this individual will come towards the end of time. He will have many followers. He is called the Dajjal because, firstly, he will lie about himself. He will claim, right? He will lie and say that he is a prophet. Okay, so that's one of the lies he will come up with. Then after that, when he gains more followers, he will then himself claim to be God. That's one of the greatest lies that he will do. And then there are many descriptions about him, how he's going to look like, how he's going to travel. He's going to have curly hair. Some say that he will be blind from one eye. He'll only be able to see from the other, from one of them. And there will be like an inscription on his forehead, Kahf and Ra. Now, many ahadith, when they talk about the future, when they talk about the eschatological framework, so eschatology means the signs of the end of days. So many of these hadith, we can't always take them literally as well. So we need to then look at scholars and see how they've interpreted them. There are many interpretations. When it comes to eschatology and the signs of the last day, there is a whole plethora of interpretations by so many people. Okay, so in regards to Dajjal, for instance, there are also some groups that have doubt in this being because he's not mentioned in the Quran and he's not mentioned in the Mu'atta of Imam Malik, because the Mu'atta of Imam Malik was a book of hadith in Medina. It's only when you have in hadith of Bukhari that it comes up. But again, that's not the mainstream understanding of Dajjal. So mainstream Muslims do believe that this figure called the Dajjal, he will come towards the end of time and there will be many battles, and he will come at a time when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will then send Isa alayhi salam to fight the Dajjal, because he is the only one who will be able to destroy him. So these are some of the things about the future, and he will cause chaos in the world. He will ask you to believe, and if you don't believe, he will kill you. He will perform so many miracles, and only Allah, not miracles, but he will be like a sorcerer, like a magician. and he will be able to bring your parents back to life, but they won't really be your parents. They'll possibly be, it will probably be jinns coming in the figure of your parents. So it's going to be a time full of fitna and corruption, and it's a very, very difficult time before Qiyamah. And that's why this surah, as Ustadha Nadda was explaining, that this surah is a surah that will protect us from the fitna of Dajjal. It will protect us from Dajjal, and also the fitna, the corruption of Dajjal. That's why this surah is important, and not just the reading of the surah, but pondering over its meaning, understanding the deeper meaning of this surah as well. Back over to you, Ustadha Nadda. I hope I've answered the question. Remember, this is a very vast topic. If you want to read more about it, I actually did my undergraduate dissertation on eschatology in Islam, where I spoke about Dajjal, Ya'juj, Ma'juj, and Prophet Isa and the Mahdi. Spoke about these concepts, but also looking at them from a perspective of Hadith and the Quran as well. But I can send you that link. If anyone's interested, do contact me privately, and I will send you the link. Ustadha Nadda, back over to you, inshallah.
All right, Jazakallah khair, Ustad. So these were some of the virtues of the Surah Al-Kahf. Moving on quickly to the background of the surah. If we do have any questions, inshallah, I'm sure Ustad Hamid will, and I will try to answer them in the end of the session. But just coming back to the background of the surah, why the surah was revealed. So this was around the time when a lot of Muslims had migrated to Abyssinia for safety, and that was a very difficult time for the Prophet ﷺ. A lot of Muslims were tortured at that time as well. So whilst this was happening, Quraysh had sent two people um, uh, to Yathrib in Medina to find out from the Jews the kind of questions they can ask Prophet Muhammad ﷺ to see if he has actually if he is the correct the true prophet or not. So the Jews sent back a few questions and they asked. So they went up to the Prophet ﷺ and they asked three different questions. The first was, why did the young men left their city and took refuge in the cave? Is there anything more? Tell us more about that. There was another question regarding a man who has traveled both from east to the west, and lastly to tell us about the spirit, the ruh. Now, just to keep in mind that all of these stories were mentioned in their scriptures as well. So they were taking out questions from their scriptures and trying to see and different stories that were mentioned. They were asking specifically to see if the prophet can answer these questions, because they weren't aware of these scriptures, as most of them were unable to read. So hence they thought this could be a way of them finding out if Muhammad ﷺ is the true prophet or not. But Alhamdulillah, after much delay, um, the Prophet ﷺ did receive the answer from Allah. So the verse in Surah Al-Kahf, verse 9, is when the Prophet ﷺ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers the question, and he talks about the whole narrative that we're going to be looking at in a while, about the Ashabul Kahf, the people of the cave. Later on in the surah, Allah answers the question regarding the man who had traveled from the east to the west in verse 83, and that was about Dhul-Qarnayn. And it's amazing how Allah also responds to them by saying, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ, and they ask you. So it's amazing how the way Allah um, tells, so it's not actually the Prophet saying. So the Prophet also recites this to show them that it's not me who is telling you these stories, but it's coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the third question was regarding the ruh, which was in Surah Al-Isra, the surah before Surah Al-Kahf. And the Prophet ﷺ tells them that, the matters of the souls are only known by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Only Allah has knowledge of that. So it's not necessarily that wherever I have given you or revealed that as humans we have knowledge of everything, only some aspects of that only Allah has knowledge of. And obviously the Jews had issues with that. But that was the basic background of when Surah Al-Kahf was revealed. Before we look at the verses today, I thought I'll just change the structure a little bit to see if it just gives you more understanding. Do let me know if you find this way more better. So I thought we'll just look at the words first and then look at the verses so you can relate with the meanings as well. So one of the words that come is awa. That's one of the words that come up in the verse 10 that we're going to be looking at, which means to be retreated, refuge, and seek shelter. So it'd be good if you can make a note of these. Keep in mind, so when we look at the verses, see if you are able to better understand the verse, because the whole point of us doing these sessions is so we are able to understand and also explain these verses to other people as well. So if we are able to do that, then alhamdulillah, we have achieved our objective. So make a note of these and see when I'm explaining, when we're looking at this verse, you're able to connect and understand it more than the words which are provided. So awa, which this is the word that will come up, and it has many meanings. The next word we're going to be looking at is fitya, and it means youth or young. And hayyu, which means to shape, facilitate, and provide. Um, so now we're going to be looking at the verse 10 and verse 9. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. إذ أوى الفتية إلى الكهف فقالوا ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا. So if I just take my pointer out, so it says when. Now it's really interesting the way this word, every time this word appears, it usually appears with this preposition ila, which means that this word doesn't, the meaning alone doesn't stand. So usually this word comes with another word to give us more better understanding. So how we translated this as retreated, taking refuge, over here has been translated as, if you just look at it by itself, it doesn't make sense until it's been connected to another word. So this word here, awa, is being connected with al-kahf. So meaning they've taken refuge and protection in the cave. Who has the young men, which have been mentioned here. So previously in the verse before this, actually in verse 9, these same people were referred as Ashabul Kahf. So they've been given different names by subhanahu wa ta'ala. They called out, faqalu, that our Lord make a way for us through your mercy. So ladunka, this word is very interesting because they have specifically have made this emphasis that only you can make this way out for us. So sometimes we do ask Allah, but they saying that the kind of situation we are in, where these young men and young people, 7 of them, alongside their dog, which has been mentioned in different tafsir. The whole idea over here is that only Allah has the power to take them out of this situation. We'll talk about what situation, what happened to them in a bit. Through your mercy, and somehow create for us, earlier on we looked at the different words of the shape and to provide. So create, make through your miracle, like help us find a way where we can go and take refuge, but not just any refuge, but a refuge that will help us, amrina rashada, that will help us to be steadfast on the path of the correct path, towards the guidance. So these people were under the they were, so it says that it's this story, this incident happened around 70 years after Isa alayhi salam was taken up. So the whole incident about how Isa alayhi salam came, so this incident has happened 70 years after. And this was a few of the Jews who were left, and they were believers. They also had an uprising against the Romans at that time, where most of them were killed, and the battles were taking place. There are different opinions regarding who the emperor was, which I don't want to get into. But the main idea, but the Quran doesn't mention who the emperor was. It was the Roman emperor who found out that these few young people still believe. This emperor didn't believe in faith, and he wanted everyone to not have this kind of association. So when he found out about these people, about these few young men, he called them to his palace and he said that, is this true that you believe? And they said, yes, that we believe. And he told them that, I'm going to give you this amount of time. In some narrations, it's been stated. Some people say that emperor didn't call them, he found out, and to run away from them, these young men came together to make a plan. But the whole idea was that the emperor didn't like the people of the town found out that they believed, these few young men have believed, they believe in Allah, they have faith. Hence, they were after them. They wanted to kill them, or kill them as in if they don't turn away from this faith, um, or either that they leave their faith and come on the path that they are following. So this was the kind of circumstance that they were in. And I think we'll look into the lessons later on, the kind of lessons we take away. But it's what's more important that we need to understand, that they were just average men. What we have been looking previously in our sessions were the prophets, the kind of situation the prophets were going through. But today we're looking at specifically young men. And the reason why I'm emphasizing the term fitya is the fact that when we are in this young age, it's very difficult for us to stay on the correct path and to be obedient to Allah and to follow the correct things. You want to try new things just for the fun of it. So it's very difficult to be able to stay firm in your beliefs. And I know sometimes it's difficult for us as Muslims in the circumstance that we live in now. Alhamdulillah, the kind of neighborhood we have in this country is easy for us to practice our religion. But sometimes we come across where people question our religion, and especially when we're in universities, colleges, even in school. Sometimes they will question us with our religion, and we fear. Sometimes we either run away from that and we don't speak out. But the bravery, the courage these men had was that there were only few of them, and yet, regardless of so many other avenues they could have taken, other ways they could have gone for and saved their life, they yet took that stand and said that no, we're going to believe in Allah, and even if it means that we're going to be killed, we're going to find a way. They had such faith in Allah that they carried on, and they made this dua to Allah. Followed by the verse 11. فَضَرَبْنَا عَلَىٰ آذَانِهِمْ فِي الْكَهْفِ سِنِينَ عَدَدًا. Now, the reason why I put this verse particularly is only for one reason, is the fact that firstly, because of the miracle that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this situation more easy, because if you can imagine, if they can hear the people outside, and even the noise in itself, they won't be able to keep up with the time they were supposed to spend in the cave. So Allah, firstly, given the ease of finding a place, they found this cave which they went into. That was first kind of a help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Second was that Allah put them to sleep. And it's interesting, the word which is being used for it, for daraba, usually we've come across this word before as well. And usually this word means to hit. So if you take the literal meaning, it wouldn't make sense how would hitting on the ears, as in it doesn't really give you the full meaning. But in reality, it means that I think if you look at the Arabs, usually if you I think Ustadha Hamid can help me out in this, but usually when you hit someone really hard on the ears, there's like a noise where you, for I think 1 second, or for even for 1 minute, you're unable to hear anything. And the Arabs are very the way they use their language is very they use a lot of imagery in their vocabulary. So there are so many words that the literal meaning is completely different. And you're like, how does this even make sense when you speak in terms of in language, in speech? Um, so over here, it's basically giving that image that when you are, the word implied here is the fact that the hearing was taken away, just giving us this imagery that um, uh, that you're unable to hear. Ustad Hamid, is that correct? Would you like to add anything to that? Okay, we'll come back to that. Um,
Yeah, sorry, Sada, I got cut off there.
so
Yes, can you hear
no,
me?
it's all right. Yeah, I can hear you. I
Yeah,
just thought my internet went off or
no, that's fine.
something.
Now, Jazakallah for that.
Uh,
That's an interesting, way of looking at the word daraba, which, when we say daraba, the first thing that comes to mind is hitting, because when we
yeah,
study Arabic, that's the first meaning that, or exciting meaning that's there. But in Arabic, there are plenty of interpretations, meanings for even single words. So here, like Ustada said, daraba, it comes in the context of sealing up their ears. But yeah, Jazakallah for
yeah.
that. And it's important that we look at all the variations and all the various understandings and interpretations of any given word, to look at the multi-layered understanding of the Quran. Jazakallah, Sada.
No, no problem. Um, Also, one of the other reasons which I really wanted to include this verse was the fact that Allah mentioned for a number of years. Now, Allah doesn't tell us clearly what that year is. And if you come across this verse, and I remember when I did and my classmates, we came across this verse, the first thing that really took us away was how many years. And I think that's how we work as humans. We usually go for things which are not mentioned. And even though there's so many other lessons in this verse, there's so much information Allah has provided, but we somehow get very interested in the facts that which are not mentioned. So over here, Allah doesn't mention the amount of years they spent, but obviously the scholars have discussed the amount of years they had been in Kahf. But I think the lesson that we should take away from here is that sometimes whatever Allah has mentioned in the Quran is absolutely the important kind of a message, will help us with our guidance. Anything which is not mentioned um, is, yes, whatever's not mentioned, um, we can look into that for more details. But whatever Allah has told us directly is absolutely the important messages. So the reason why Allah didn't mention was that was not the important kind of an aspect of how many. Allah wants us to focus on the fact that this is something Allah can do, that's in His ability, and He doesn't want us to divert away from these details. And also, the time that this verse was revealed, the Jews have this um, uh, they are always interested in looking at these small details. Even the way they were testing the Prophet ﷺ, they would go back to the scriptures and go and see if they can find some kind of a way to trick the Prophet ﷺ. So they would do that a lot. And I think for them, when this revelation was revealed, was too much to take, because they cannot comprehend that why this was not mentioned. It was a test for them, that if the clarity is not mentioned, do they still believe? And they did make out, they did ask the Prophet ﷺ, that why, that obviously they still had issues, because if you don't want to believe in Allah, then you would make up so many questions and excuses. Um, but I think what we need to remember from these verses is that we should always look at the what is Allah is saying and take away lessons and make that as the focal point and not get distracted by the other details. Um, so hence why I thought that these two verses were really important. And again, it all comes down to summarize these two verses. What it comes down to is um, our faith in Allah in these different circumstances. Um, Sometimes in our normal circumstances, we still make dua to Allah, but the way we ask Allah when we're in a very difficult situation is completely different. Our faith in Allah at that moment increases when when we're in a difficult time. So inshallah, if you, and I'm sure Ustad Hamid towards the end will share some of his interesting bits of the surah and when he studied. But this is the only detail I wanted to go into, because this whole surah has so many lessons. It narrates the other stories, the way Allah protected them while they were in the cave, the way the light of the sun would enter. So all of that detail has been mentioned. But I just wanted to focus on just these two lessons, and these, simple reflections we can take away from this. So the kind of lessons we take away from these verses, and I think because I have always mentioned in my previous tafsir sessions about the prophets, I think what the highlight of today's tafsir session is the fact that you don't have to have a lot of knowledge in order to have this very special relationship with Allah, for your du'as to be answered by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And even though we don't think that way, but sometimes we feel like this because we live around different people, we come across different people, and you see lots of people who have knowledge, they talk about the religion, and you always feel like you don't have that same kind of relationship with Allah because you don't have that knowledge. And I think in this verse, which the kind of lesson I took away was that these people were average people who had faith. Faith has always been the main aspect, um, uh, which is like the main thing which Allah will ask us about. So it's our hearts and what we believe in. Even on the Day of Judgment, Allah will look at the hearts of the believers. So it's what we believe deep down in our heart which matters the most. So never ever feel like you cannot speak to Allah or make dua to Allah because you don't have that knowledge. It doesn't matter in what words you ask Allah the duas in, the way you speak to Allah. It doesn't have to be at prayer times. You can always make a dua any moment you want. But it's preferred to do it after prayers or during prayer times or those specific timings. But never ever think, especially our the younger audience which is watching, never feel like you cannot ask Allah for something that Allah would never respond to you because you have less knowledge. Secondly, having certainty that Allah will provide from means which we cannot even imagine. This has been mentioned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala various times in the Qur'an, but specifically in these two verses, I think it was a huge miracle, the fact that, just them going and escaping to a cave was the best solution for them, the idea that came to them. And that happens to us as well a lot of times, where we think that there is no other way, that's it. And at that moment, Allah provides another way from someone, and He takes you out of that difficult time. And the last lesson I wanted to focus on was the fact that they asked Allah through His mercy, because whatever we do is never enough. We make mistakes, but at the end of the day, it's through Allah's mercy, because that's one of His great attributes. Um, is um, is the best way to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And whatever Allah does is never because of what we've done, because whatever we do is never enough. Um, but it's through His mercy that He provides for us. And it was really beautiful the way those young men called out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they said specifically, through your mercy, grant us a way that will take us out of this difficult time. So these were some of the lessons I took away. Um, just to you know make sure that these lessons that I take away, these are my personal reflections from these verses. So do not feel like there's no other lessons. If you feel like there's other ways that you can relate to these verses, then please do share them. But these were my kind of lessons I took away from these verses, and I thought they were important to reflect over. So I will finish the session up to here. So if there's anything else Ustad Hamid wants to add, Ustad, you are free to speak.
Okay, Jazakallah Ustadha Nadda for your time, and Jazakallah for the tafsir lesson that we had today. I'll just go on to some of the questions that came up on chat. So we've got them with everyone else as well. So Fiza Ibrahim, I'm mentioning that I'm finding it easier when the vocabulary is on the slide before we read the verse, as we can relate to it more. So that's Jazakallah for that point.
Jazakallah.
Um, another point that's come up from Hussein mentions the same as well, that he finds it easier too. Zahra is saying yes, and we actually understand it more as when it is after we have to re-understand it with the meaning. So I think the vocabulary should be first. Sorry, I accidentally put caps. That's fine. Okay, so yeah, that's an interesting point there, Usada. If you maybe want to put the vocabulary before the actual verse, maybe talk about it, explore it more. That way, when students look at the Arabic text, it speaks
Yeah,
to them more and
yeah,
it's more understanding. So Jazakallah for your feedback, students, as well. Yeah, so Jazakallah again. So again, there was this thing about isolation, and when it came to the youngsters, the Ashabul Kahf, the people of the cave, they had no other option, right? The whole world was up in arms against them. They were being searched. There was, kind of search warrants up against them. They had no other way but to run away from their own town. And can you imagine, the place where you're born, where you've lived, where you've grown up, you are no longer welcome. And again, trying to understand that kind of isolation, that you are being killed, or you're at danger, your life is at stake because of your faith. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, that fityatun amanu bi rabbihim wazidnahum huda, that these were youngsters who believed in their Lord and we increased their guidance. So, especially for youngsters, I think it's a very important message that if youngsters are following their faith, and those who are young staying on faith and being Muslim, right, is a much more difficult, experience, because you've got the whole world in front of you. There's so much more that you can do, right? When time for Salah comes, right, and I'm talking to our students, when time for Salah comes, you have your gaming on one side, right? You have your PlayStation or Xbox, whatever it is, on one side. You have, certain films on Netflix on the other side. And I'm talking in terms of isolation, even. And then there's so much entertainment and so much luxury. And then comes the time for Salah. Okay. To hold on to Salah and to hold on to your faith is such a difficult thing. It's such a big challenge. And therefore, coming back and reflecting over the story of these youngsters who ran away from their town. Why? Okay. Remember, it would have been easy for them had they just said, you know what, we can just hide our faith and we'll pretend we're not believers and go back and go back to normal life. But no, they wanted to stay firm. And Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he also talks about this, this kind of times where Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, towards the end of times, it will become so difficult to stay on your faith. It becomes so difficult to remain on your faith. It will be like holding a burning coal. Okay, holding a burning coal. So sometimes when the radiator is really hot and you touch it from the back of your hand, all of a sudden your whole body feels the shock. Okay, imagine holding a burning coal. And Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gives this example of staying onto your faith during these difficult times. So that's why the example of these youngsters is ever more important for us. And then, if as youngsters you stay firm on your faith, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do? What did He do for Ashab al-Kahf? وَزِدْنَاهُمْ huda. Allah says, we increased their guidance. So the more younger you are when you're on your faith, the more guidance, inshallah, Allah will give you, as long as our heart is sincere and we want to follow the guidance. And Ustadha was mentioning that we need to always ask Allah for His mercy, constantly, all the time. Because remember, it doesn't matter what kind of problem we're in, okay? Big, small, extremely big, right? But Allah's mercy is greater than all the problems of this world put together. And who are we asking directly? We're directly connecting and linking with Allah. So this is incredibly important for us, that we understand that there are various tests from Allah. We will do the best that we can do. Okay, and just as the Ashabul Kahf, the only way out for them was to run away and find a cave, which they did. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loved their act, that look, they were staying on their faith, and in order to remain steadfast on their faith, they gave up the luxury, right? They imagine they gave up all the luxuries of the city, and the metropolis, and they gave up the luxuries of the that were there in the city and the people, and they isolated completely for Allah. That Allah mentioned their story in the Quran, and their story will be read till the day of judgment. And also, if you want to be protected from the fitna of Dajjal, you will read the story on every Friday. Subhanallah. So it's a lesson for us as well, that we learn more about this, we understand more about this as well, inshallah. I'll just finish off on some comments that have come in on YouTube. So Mehwish Khan is saying, Assalamu alaikum, Jazakallah khair for the lesson. Lot to learn and beautiful lessons and reminders for us. Jazakallah, Sister Mehwish. And Ustadha Zanib Yaqub has also commented for you, Ustadha Nadda. She's mentioned, Jazakallah khair, Ustadha Nadda, for another wonderful lesson, with a smiley face. And Sister Mahwish also has said, Jazakallah khair, Ustadha Nadda. And I think on that point, we will end our tafsir lesson. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Inshallah, see you next week, same time, 6 o'clock rather than 7 o'clock.